This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by the Next 1000 Pledge at pledgebank.com/next1000.
You know, Ron, I know one of the bills that you plan to introduce this coming January is a bill to audit the gold. And you mentioned what happened with the breakdown of Bretton Woods. And a lot of people who think that in the late 1960s and before Nixon closed the gold window, that a lot of gold left the United States during that chaotic monetary period under LBJ and then under Nixon. And I know you'd like to see what exactly is there, and of course also who owns what's there.
Yeah, seeing the gold and counting bars won't give you the answer that we need, because there are they could give it to another country but hold it for them. They could have swap arrangements. They could lend the gold out. So it's a lot more than that. I mean, to fully audit it, I think you have to know what the Fed has done, all their agreements. You have to know what our Treasury has done, especially the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which has legal authority to deal in gold. That was set up, in the 1930s after Roosevelt stole the gold from the American people, and they were told they could trade in gold and try to set prices and that kind of thing. So now their reports don't reveal it, but somewhere I think that buried in the records you might find out that they participate in this, probably indirectly. It's probably not right out in front. That's what is so difficult. Even what the Fed does, you could have the Fed turn over all the books and say, well, we loan so-and-so some money because they can make loans to other countries and other central banks. But it may be secretly quid pro quo. Well, we're going to give you this $10 billion, but your obligation is to buy Treasury bills or buy Fannie Mae mortgages and this sort of thing. So it's not an easy audit, but I still think it has to be pursued. I mean, anybody, and it should be done now that the Republicans are back in control, because it's supposed to be a little neater and a little cleaner. But if you're taking over a business, you want to make an assessment. What do we have? What do we own? And what are our plans? If gold has to be used again, and history's on our side, gold is always used again. It's always constantly used, sometimes more so than others. But an assessment of what we have and what kind of obligations we are, I think that is mandatory. And I've been very pleased with my mere mentioning of that. I wasn't out putting out press releases, but there was a large number of people in the financial community, not necessarily, the hard money people. A lot of people in the financial community have expressed a deep interest in this, and I think it's very logical. And this should bring in progressives and libertarians and conservatives. Anybody who's honest should say, well, why can't we know? It doesn't mean we have to all agree on what monetary policy should be, but there's no reason in the world why we can't have transparency, whether it's that of the gold or what kind of deals the Fed is making.
And Ryan, I know that one of you said that when you become chairman, we certainly hope, keep our fingers crossed, you become chairman of the Monetary Policy Subcommittee. As of course I'm aware, obviously you are aware, that they've blocked you 3 times in the past with various insider shenanigans, even though by seniority standards, of course, you should be taking Barney Frank's place as chairman of the entire committee. But if they don't block you again, and I think it would be very, very difficult for them to do so, you said you want to open up the books of the Fed, make it transparent, share with the American people exactly what this very, very powerful institution, maybe the most powerful institution in the world, has been doing.
Yeah, those are the goals. We want transparency just so people have more information. I believe this is important, that when the time comes when reform will be forced upon us, that we will know what we're dealing with, and then we can offer the reforms. But in order to do that, I think we have to have a better understanding by a lot more people about the business cycle. Business cycle theory is not the top priority in Washington. Matter of fact, they've ignored it totally and don't think much about it. And if they do, they'll accept the notion, oh, well, there's not enough people spending money, and if you don't want a downturn, you just print more money and get people to buy stuff. That's their idea of understanding the business cycle. So I think what I'd like to do is, pursue that in the committee and have people come in and start talking about the business cycle and how that is related to monetary policy. And I will welcome those who disagree with us and say, look, we don't agree with this. But bring our people in and say that there is a connection. And you'll have all kinds of variations. You could have the Keynesians talk, but you could have the monitors come in too and make their claims. You could have the supply side or stuff. But I think our views can stand up against any of those views, and I think it's very important that people come around to understanding how monetary policy is the key element in understanding the business cycle.
Ron, I saw a prediction this morning that to quote-unquote clean up the Freddie and Fannie mess will cost $686 billion. In other words, they're saying almost 7/10 of $1 trillion. And, of course, who can believe them, right? And who knows what they mean by clean up. But is this something that will be coming up in this next year or two, that huge dark hole Fannie and Freddie mess?
Oh, very definitely, and it won't be only a few of us doing that. I think the Republican members of the House Financial Services Committee, I think there's quite a few in there that are quite willing to look into that. They see it as a partisan issue, because the former chairman of the committee was very much into subsidizing and helping Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And they have all supported the transparency of the Fed. So I think they will be looking into it, and I think they're going to have a hard time literally appropriating that money. I think, when push comes to shove, of course, the Fed is always there. They will not allow, the liquidation and the correction, which is so necessary. But I don't think on the surface the Fed is going, or the Congress is going to come in and bail them out. Unfortunately, they won't push hard enough for what I think is important is, if there's $600 billion of bad debt out there, the quicker you find out what it's really worth and let the people who are holding the bad debt suffer the consequences. But instead, the people who've been making all this money over these years when the bubble was being formed, they're getting the bailout, and who's getting stuck with holding these illiquid, worthless assets? The American taxpayer. So that's why, I think it's so pessimistic for our dollar. Our dollar's not doing so well. I think it looks like the dollar and the Canadian dollar is about 1-for-1 right now. So that's a dramatic change.
This edition of the Ridley Report is brought to you by
Next 1000.
Hundreds of liberty activists have joined the Free State Project and moved to New Hampshire for more liberty. But what if we could get 2,000 here by the autumn of 2011? That's the goal of the Next 1000 pledge. Drop by pledgebank.com/next1000 and sign up today.
Next 1000.
Gratuitas papelec domin hatis.